Massive weekend for recruiting for Wisconsin Badgers football. We have got one of the best on the Wisconsin Badgers beat joining the show today. Jon McNamara jumps on. We're going to talk official visits and some thoughts that he has on this class that's coming in. All that and more. Today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Appreciate the heck out of everybody jumping in, joining the show today, being in every day, or making this one of your first listens. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet wins. Today's episode, we were talking about that official visit weekend coming up, superlatives, key visitors, some questions and answers. But first, we got the great Jon McNamara joining the show for, I think, the fourth or fifth time. Always a blast to have you on. I want to start here, man. So I saw your show earlier with, Perko, Badger Blitz TV. I saw your announcement that at the end of this month, you are going to be moving on from Rivals, Badger Blitz. I know he said some things on the show about thank you and appreciation. I want to start there too. I've been reading your stuff for like 2 decades. And I mean, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, man, for always being a really great representative of what the media should be, of putting out great content for the Badger community. And for being a real one. Like you easily could have big timed me. And when I reached out to you the first time, you were kind and open and you jumped on the show. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for the community, man.
Yeah, man, that means a lot. And this week has just kind of been a lot of like that kind of stuff taken in and reflecting. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone who's had kind words, right? Really humbling. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of flown by, right? I mean, I've been doing this, going back to when I was at the student newspaper of Wisconsin for over 20 years now. And to have it all come to an end here is, I don't know if it's sunk in yet, but I mean, it's been a great ride. Tons and tons of fun, super fortunate to be able to do this. It's a unique job. It's a fun job. And, like I said, before, the people are great. All the people that I've talked about on the things or the board or the shows, but I mean, you're certainly one of them, Ryan. It's been fun to watch, this show grow and you grow and, to build your audience, build that community. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that I was just doing in a different space. So I appreciate that from you. That means a lot.
And by the way, I'm going to take a really quick deep dive, and everyone should go listen to the show he did with Perko today. It was today or yesterday. I listened to it today. It's great. You mentioned Lone Star. And people, listen, younger people aren't going to know that. And people who maybe were on the boards. I used to go back and forth with that guy all the time. And if nothing else, he was super passionate. I hope he's doing incredible wherever he is. But it called me back to those days I was on the board battling with him. So I thought that was a great call out.
Yeah, Lone Star, Army One, Lefty Larry. I know Lefty Larry's still around. Larry's a good dude. We just had to part ways with him, and he's okay with that. Lefty Larry's very well off. I can tell you that much. He's not struggling. So yeah, those are the early days of like jumping in and trying to build that board and take the good with the bad and trying to mesh it all together. And some posters shine a little stronger than others, and sometimes it's just a bit too much. But it's like I said, it's those people that make it, right? I mean, it's going through the posts on our board right now of the people that have been there for 18 years, just as long as I have, and to hear their stories. And I was here from the start with you, and it's been a great ride and all that. It's just it's wild to think about. But again, just super fortunate to be put in that situation and have great people that have been around me this whole time. Like like Jay Kokorowski, Ben Wargle, going way back, like Kyle Hakinen, who's now a big time college basketball coach, Tom Lee, who's doing bigger and better things right now. Dan Sanger, who's been taking photos for us forever. The list kind of goes on. And, most recently, Donnie Slusher, Seamus Rohr. I mean, like I said before, you don't get this far without just great people. So I'm just so appreciative of the talent that's been around me to allow me to go as long as I have.
Man, that's phenomenal stuff. And a couple of people in the chat, Will Hanna, you did great work, John. Kyle Matry, thanks, John. Chris Hart says excited for this show. A lot of people definitely kind of there with you on that one. Let's move into this big recruiting weekend. Massive weekend is coming up for the Badgers. A couple weekends coming up. You hit some superlatives with Perko earlier, so I'm going to give you a few different ones. The first one in here is, with all these commits coming in, who's the highest upside commit? If everything clicks, scheme, talent, physical ability, who's the highest upside guy coming to campus this weekend?
Yeah, you could make a case for a number of these guys. It's tough to not go with a guy like Mikhail Blade, right? He seems to be a special type of edge player. I think he's a perfect fit at Wisconsin, but he's probably a perfect fit for all the top schools in his top 7, right? To be able to get an edge guy like him would be pretty special. Obviously he's pretty well accomplished on the high school level, but that upside from a guy like him, I think obviously shows why he's a top prospect for Wisconsin. And you have schools like Notre Dame, Michigan, USC involved in his recruitment. A guy that maybe Wisconsin fans, maybe myself, had written off of, like, I don't really know if Wisconsin can be a true contender here, but he just kind of kept popping up on campus, for the last, year, maybe year plus, most recently there for the spring showcase. And now you're getting him on your preferred official visit weekend for Wisconsin. So, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of, how they can move the needle with him this weekend. But there's a lot of stuff that I know he likes about Wisconsin. I'm not really ready to say that he's going to land there, because I think Michigan and Notre Dame might be a little tick above right now. But, look, they're getting him up here on their preferred time. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when they get him up there, and, the 15 other guys on campus as well this weekend.
Next one I got is who's got the best film? Like, if you just sat someone down from all these films, what would you enjoy the most watching?
Yeah, it's tough not to go with Amari Latimer.
Right?
His is lengthy. Like, you could, crack a beer open, pop some chips open, and watch his film for a while. But I mean, it's that running back film is always fun to watch. But he is a punishing back who has like some real good patience, some good vision too. And to watch him against pretty good competition down in Georgia, to know that he's Wisconsin's top running back target in this cycle. He's certainly got some fun film to pop on. It's just some film I guess I was watching just recently, Ben Wenzel. I was familiar with him, obviously just being an in-state kid. I keep a pretty good eye on all the in-state kids as much as I possibly can. And then he gets that Oklahoma offer, and you're like, okay, I gotta watch the tape again. And then kind of going in this weekend of guys that you're trying to maybe put some content together for, you take another look. And I mean, every time you watch it, it looks maybe a little bit better. Really kind of a polished tackling machine from Appleton. I think he winds up at Wisconsin, but if you're going for maybe the biggest eye popper, it's probably Amari Latimer. But look, another guy like Ryan Hopkins, you watch his film, you like him quite a bit too. And then that he's going to play at Mater Dei this upcoming year. That's another jump up. That's about as high as you can get at the high school level. So it's going to be interesting to see his senior film when that drops too.
I love that you brought those two up, because I have follow-up questions for both of them. I'm going to start with the Amari Latimer. I feel like he's kind of similar. If you look at Badger backs that we've covered, that we've seen, Corey Clement. I think kind of that type of back, maybe even a little more physical, maybe not quite as nimble with the feet. Where does he look like to you if you look back at Badger backs? Is Clement a good comp, or there's somebody I'm missing here?
I like the Clement comp. He's a physical between the tackles runner too. So I think Clement fits, not a guy like maybe John Clay, maybe not that big, but I do like the Clement. I mean, Clement was thick, stout with that running style. I like that comparison. I'll go with that one, Ryan. That works for me.
Love it. Let me ask you my Hopkins one. So I feel like, and rightfully so, Hopkins has committed. He's in the class. So you're talking about Pettit, you're talking about Blade, you're talking about Latimer, and I'm saying you as in the Badger fan base. That's what we're talking about. This feels like a potential big visit for Hopkins to me, because he is about to go to Mater Dei. What if he blows up there? This is a battle that, even though he's in the class, you might need to continue battling for. I think this is a sneaky, really important visit for Ryan Hopkins.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess every day until December is going to be an opportunity for you with Ryan Hopkins. It's obviously, look, he's committed, and he's made some comments that, I'm committed to Wisconsin, but look, I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open. And he's maybe one of the few that just went on the record and said that, right? A lot of guys may be feeling that way, but they just don't tell people like me and you that. And you hear stuff behind the scenes of like, yeah, this kid's committed, but I know that he's looking. I think Wisconsin fans would sleep a lot better if Ohio State just locked up a 4 or 5-star kid, sometime this summer, which is very possible. But, again, if you look at Ohio State too, they have a 5-star committed in 27. I'm trying to get my classes all straight. So like that plays a role into it too, why they may not have a quarterback yet in this class, because those group of kids, they look ahead and they look at, they already took care of their business in the following cycle. So a lot of these schools do have quarterback commitments already. So it's not this huge pool. And you see these dominoes fall quickly in the spring where schools basically have their pecking order and they kind of give these kids the green light to go because, either their top target came off or their next, or whatever it may be. So a lot of those dominoes have fallen. The school you're looking at probably is Ohio State. Obviously anything can happen in the next handful of months, but I guess as of today, you feel good about where Wisconsin's at, obviously because you landed this commitment. Wisconsin, what are you going to do? You have to accept it. Then you have to cancel the guys like, they knocked out Travis Burgess, his official, one or two others. So right now you just got to continue to show him the love. Like you said, Ryan, this weekend will be big. You get him around a couple other commitments, you get him around those top targets, you get him on campus again, which is huge. And you just continue to show him why he committed. And you just hope in God that you pray that you make it to December and he's still there ready to sign for you.
Man, one more follow-up on Hopkins. I was trying to think back to, the quarterbacks that the Badgers have recruited, that they've landed, even the ones that maybe haven't panned out. Is this the toolsiest quarterback they've landed? Not necessarily the best, but he could be the toolsiest with his speed, his size, his arm.
Well, the speed, you look at Ryan Hopkins and maybe at first glance, the speed doesn't pop out to you, but then you watch the film, then you look at the track times and see what he's done there. And that's a big time thing that he's got in his skill set. And then, you look at the footwork, and I don't pretend to be a quarterback guru or a quarterback coach, but I mean, you could see certain guys, the ball kind of pops out of their arm. I think he can make the majority of those throws at the high school level. I do expect him to take another probably significant jump here at modern day, like you talked about. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like there. There's a reason why we have him as a 4-star kid right now. There's a reason why he had 20 plus offers, and there's a reason why Ohio State is still keeping very, very close tabs on him. I think all those kind of things speak to what he brings to the table. The size is good, the arm's good, all those things you're looking for. And like I said, that speed element and what he can do when the pocket breaks down, I think that's, I don't want to say the most intriguing thing about him, but just not a thing that Wisconsin quarterbacks have generally brought to the table.
Oh, I know. Yeah, having loved a lot of them. I know.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick second here. Great stuff with Jon as always. Come back and we're going to talk about the most underrated commit that he thinks might be coming to campus, plus some more thoughts on this defense line and receiver group. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is absolutely incredible, and they got you locked in with the NBA playoffs going on, Major League Baseball. I was just watching Braves Phillies today. It is a great platform. It's simple, it's easy, it's fast. If you've never bet before, use the sports book. This is an easy way to get into it. The user interface is incredible to use. There's customer support, and I always talk about it. Listen, when Grandma Herrings owes me money, she pays me. Same with FanDuel. It's fast, it's simple, it's safe, it's reliable, it's trustworthy. When you're supposed to get paid, you're going to get paid over at FanDuel.com. And plus, it's a great time if you're a new member to FanDuel. If you're signing up for the first time, you head over to FanDuel. Perfect time to sign up. With your first $5 bet, if you hit that, you're going to win $200 in bonus bets over at FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NBA and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. You're not going to go wrong. Always do it responsibly over at FanDuel.com. All right, let's jump back into this with Jon. Again, I could talk to him for hours about this stuff, so I got to be respectful of the time. I want to hit you with this one. Most underrated guy coming to campus, somebody that maybe people aren't talking about enough.
That's a good question. I'd probably go Jack Sievers, the tight end coming from Washington. Obviously we have him as a 3-star kid, so he's not, completely under the radar. But I like what Wisconsin's done in that recruitment. I'd go as far as to say Wisconsin's the leader going into this. But I can tell you that Oklahoma is pushing real hard here. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can squeeze in an official visit. It's going to be interesting to see if he commits this weekend to Wisconsin. I think there's a lot of things on the table here. But like I said, I think Wisconsin's got is in a very good position right now, but Oklahoma's pushing real hard. You put on the tape. I think the biggest question is, is he an H-back? Is he an inline guy? To me, he could do probably a little bit of both. It depends on what you'd like him to do when he gets on campus, assuming that he does wind up at Wisconsin. He's got Boise State, he's got Minnesota, San Diego State. I don't know how worried you are about those 3 schools, but Minnesota, I think, is a legit player for him if he makes it to that trip. But, I could see that if he makes it beyond this weekend, Oklahoma keeps pounding and pounding and pounding. They get Boise out and they get them on that next following weekend. And that's probably a trip you don't want to take if you're a Wisconsin staff or a recruiting fan.
Yeah, Greg Linscomb says, great to see the quality of recruits we're getting campus. Will Hanna says, Bardau most underrated. I really like the film. He is very smooth. Bardau, a committed one on campus this weekend. What are your thoughts on Taan Bardau?
I like him as a start to this class, right? In a class that I think if the combination's right, maybe it gets to 4. I think 3 is a safer number. But like I said, a good start. But you look at some other guys that they're on, Zach Washington, Jaden Pettit, those in a couple of other guys that are slated to come second and third weekend potentially. Dallas Dickerson's out there. There's a lot of guys that I think that Jordan Reed has done an excellent job of building those relationships in his first year and then getting them on campus this weekend and then potentially weekend 2, weekend 3 for him. So like I said, I like Bardau and what he brings, but there are, in my opinion, some maybe a little bit more intriguing guys on Wisconsin's board that they may be able to snag in the cycle.
Yeah, let's hit that for a second because I love that you almost paused when you said Pettit. You're like, and man, there's Jaden Pettit out there. He's unique, man.
He's different, right? Yeah, I mean, we have him listed as a tight end. And I had to kind of double check of like, hey, where do you guys like him? Oh, we like him at receiver. What's been the biggest need over the last handful of cycles, really since Luke Fickell's been here? I mean, they've done a very nice job getting slot guys. They haven't done a great job of getting those true boundary guys like a Jaden Pettit, 6'4", 205 pounds. And there's just not a whole lot of those guys that can have that size and play the receiver position, right? I mean, a lot of those guys you might peg as an H-back. Let's see how they grow. Let's see how much weight they put on. But Wisconsin likes him as a receiver. Big 4-star kid from Florida. He's got Oklahoma. He's got North Carolina, Miami. A few other schools are kind of involved in that recruitment, but those are the 4 he expects to take officials to. I like where Wisconsin's at right now, but if he ends up taking all 4 of those officials, we'll have to kind of see what happens. But a kid like that, a 4-star from Florida, coming up on his own dime a couple times in the spring, I mean, that's 1, a good sign, and 2, kind of rare. So, I mean, this will be that 3rd trip for him. It'll be huge to get him around those guys, get him around those commits. I know he likes that coaching staff. He's got a real good connection with, Jordan Reed, a couple others in that department. I don't want to say he's going to be a true difference maker and he's going to be the impact and all those things, but Wisconsin doesn't get kids like him very often. And he would be one of the more intriguing, if not the most intriguing kid, if they were to somehow get him to join this 26 class.
Yeah, I think that would be a massive win. And I like the fact that you have Hopkins here with those 2 big-time receiver targets, with Bardau, with Latimer. That feels like a great group to have Hopkins with. And how big of a deal is that? How big of a deal is it to have those committed guys here?
Huge. I mean, that's the whole idea of, get all your guys committed up there to get around your top targets. And I mean, that is that goes back and as long as these officials have been going on. But I mean, truly in the summer where you got, this handful committed, let's get these kids committed around our top targets and just hope some magic happens. And I think, Luke Fickell and his staff, look, I mean, they've been criticized for a handful of things, but what they've done recruiting wise, I think has been very solid. I would expect this weekend to produce a handful of commitments. Not sure how many, but there's a few guys that you're looking at that you feel pretty good probably exiting because, look, we've written a lot of stories and other people have written stories and, I've laid out every visit these guys plan to take. But if the last couple of Junes have showed you anything, these guys take 1 visit, they take 2, they often don't make it to weekend 3. And then I think last year there's even a weekend 4. And even for Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin's got 10 guys lined up for that 3rd weekend. It will not be 10 guys because they're going to tell some guys that we're full or some guys will have committed. So things are going to go at a lightning pace in June because that's been the case the last 3 years, 3-4 cycles, however long it's been when these summer officials have been able to take place.
Well, I think that's really fascinating you brought up because when I grew up on recruiting following it, I always read and I always believed that last visit was the most important. You get that last visit. It feels like the first visit is the most important visit.
Yeah, because you might not get that last visit. Certainly, obviously, you and I are hyper-focused on Wisconsin, but I think a lot of schools are going this way. There's not a lot, or I shouldn't say not everyone, because like a school like Notre Dame, I think they have that June 20th weekend maybe pegged as their big one, but you can't bank on a guy coming the weekend of June 13th because, like I said, he may not make it there. So Wisconsin's approach, and they've had 4 official visitors earlier in the cycle, just because I think those guys are ready to maybe push a little bit harder than this other group has been. But they have wanted to use that first weekend as this is our biggest weekend. These are our top targets. And I don't want to speak for the staff, or I don't want to speak for anyone there, but I mean, if you look at it, it's kind of a tiered approach where our top tier, our second tier coming that second weekend, our third tier if we need to get there. And again, sometimes they don't use that third weekend at all, that maybe for just the couple pieces that they still need to add to that class. So if you are a guy coming up this weekend, if you're on campus already right now, right, Thursday night coming in tomorrow morning, you are a top tier plan A, take every day of the week type of guy. So we'll see how Wisconsin does this week. I think it's going to be productive. I think there's going to be a handful of commitments. We'll just have to see when the dust settles on Sunday morning.
Love it, man. We're going to take one more quick break, come back, finish up with Jon. Some of his time at Badger Blitz, I want to talk about that. Plus, what would a successful weekend look like this weekend? We've talked about it a little bit with Jon. I'll get a little bit more on that coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers. Jon, we had a couple people submit questions just knowing that you'd be on here. The first one is from Izzy. Any football commits on the horizon? I think we know the answer to that is yes. So I want to reframe this a little bit to what is a successful weekend this weekend?
Yeah, it's tough to say, if they don't land 5, it's going to be a bad weekend for them. It's tough to really quantify what would determine success, what wouldn't determine success. I really think you want to look 1 month from now, right, at that July 1, where Wisconsin's at. I expect their commitment list to double. They're, that's 7 right now. I think they're going to be at 14, 15, 16. There's been classes where, June 15th, like July 15th or August 1st hits, and they're just about full. I mean, they're looking at maybe 1, maybe 2 more guys. So like I said, things are going to happen really fast. I don't want to put a number on it and say, well, if they don't get to 12 by Sunday, this is Luke Fickell can't do it, and we got to find someone, all those type of things. You don't really know. I know the staff has a good idea about who they feel really good about. Then surprises happen. Like, look at last cycle. If you and I were talking a year ago at this time, I wouldn't have said Logan Powell was going to commit. I mean, that one was wow. I mean, they really blew it out of the water for him, and he was ready, and it all kind of worked out. I think there will be some of those stories this year, and maybe there's going to be some guys Wisconsin feels great about that get to that second, third weekend with another school, and they don't end up at Wisconsin. That certainly has been the case as well. So I don't want to quantify a number. They're going to be strong in June. Let's see where they're at maybe a month from now.
And then this is from Kyle Matry. How does the safety board stand? Seems like a lot of guys coming in. You have Reddish, Taylor, Tilson, Forney. I know you just recently did some content on this. Where does this board stand to you?
Yeah, I think maybe the most interesting thing to me is that, the cornerback board is really light right now, but the safety board is a little bit more heavy, I guess, is the opposite of light. I think maybe you're starting to see those quote unquote safeties are guys that you think could play nickel. So like a guy like Nick Reddish, yeah, I think he's a safety, but he could probably play nickel for you if you need him to. That might not be a cornerback anymore. A guy like Zach Taylor, I think he's a cornerback, but he could play cornerback if you needed him to, but he's going to play safety if Wisconsin were to land it. But he's another guy, he could probably play nickel for you. So you took 3 last year, and it doesn't seem to be a position of need, but I could see them take 3 more in this cycle just because of the guys that they're bringing up, the talent that they're bringing up. And I think they'd have a hard time turning away any of the guys that they plan to bring up these next couple weekends. Certainly look at Reddish, long-time target for them. Notre Dame's kind of out there, but, to me, if Notre Dame wanted him, I think they would have got him by now. So some of these schools, hey, yeah, let's have you come up third weekend, fourth weekend. There may not be as high on their recruiting board as a school like Wisconsin, where like Nick Reddish, he wants to commit today. Wisconsin's taking him. So then you go to that potential third weekend. You got the 2 Georgia kids, Forney and Combe. We'll see how, what that board looks like when that weekend rolls around. But, those are some intriguing guys as well. Package deals rarely work. They're often talked about, rarely kind of come through, but you feel like you couldn't turn away those guys. So safety's super intriguing. And I guess I'll close by just saying, like, Jack Cooper, he's done a really I don't want to say quietly, but he's done a really nice job recruiting wise and putting Wisconsin in a position with a handful of pretty intriguing safeties that are coming up in June.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people who have quietly raved about him. Again, maybe quietly is not the right word, but he seems like a nice up and coming coach that they found for that spot. Let me ask you this, man, because obviously we know Xavier Lucas left, and he was that size speed corner. Last year they tried to get his Gentry. They tried to go after. I'm blanking on the other kid from Florida, Raheem Stroud, who they went after, was also kind of that longer runner. It feels to me like there's still a bit of a need there for a longer corner that can run. And you mentioned the cornerback board is a little, maybe light is the wrong word, but it's where is that room? Is that a need to you?
Yeah, to me it's a huge need. But if you're Wisconsin, and again, this is just kind of me thinking out loud. As I was doing our cornerback preview, I was thinking about this. You're in a tough spot because you've recruited that position well, and then you've watched all the young guys just leave, right? Because they weren't playing. And some of the young guys would have been playing had they just waited on Xavier Lucas not being with the team. So I don't want to say that Wisconsin's just shutting down high school recruiting at cornerback, because that's obviously not the case. Carson Elam's is a nice start. I think they need 3 in this class, but I couldn't point to you the third guy behind, Theodore, who's coming up the second weekend, who they're in a really great spot with. And I think Theodore is likely leaning towards Tennessee, the in-state school there. So I don't know. But again, it's a tough situation because you've worked super hard recruiting, and I think they've done a nice job, but all of those guys left with the exception of Emilio Agard, because they weren't playing. So what do you do there? Keep pounding and then potentially lose guys? I don't think you stop recruiting, but I think that's something on your mind of like, hey, let's be really selective here of guys that we know are good fits that plan to be here for year 2 at least. And then, corner is probably one of the more manageable spots to get through the portal. Again, you don't want to live in the portal at any position, but I think you could find guys that can come in and play, contribute, be solid. But again, I don't know. That's maybe the biggest question mark position I have going into June.
Yeah, and to your point, it feels like they did that in the portal with Latimer. Obviously, Amari's older brother is a guy who they're able to go in and find. I want to hit you with a couple, again, with your time kind of coming to an end at Badger Blitz and something that was kind of on your timeline, which is amazing. I do want to hit you with a couple questions here from kind of your time covering the Badgers. You ready?
Yeah.
As on our way out the door. Who's the most right you were on a prospect? Like you were ahead of the curve, ahead of the industry. You knew this player would be a star or a really solid guy. Who was the guy you were most right on?
That's tough. I don't want to, the name that comes to me is Hunter Wohler, because I told the story on maybe a different show, but like, I remember talking to his dad super early in the process, and, he's kind of like, you don't know until you know, right? And this is like his sophomore year after his sophomore film dropped. I saw him at a high school basketball game at Muskego, and he's like, hey, we're just trying to get this recruitment going, and we're trying to figure things out. And I don't know, we're talking to Hunter, and we're talking to a couple coaches. I think we're going to go out to North Dakota. And I was like, man, dude, like, I was just like, hey, I think you guys are good. Like, I looked at that sophomore tape, and like, to me, Hunter's a power 4 player every day of the week. And I told him that because I was just being honest. And then like in the back of mine, I'm like, I hope I'm right. Like, I hope I'm watching the right thing here. But like, look, it wasn't just me that was right. I think anyone could put on that tape and be like, this kid is a no doubt kid. I mean, his tape was electric. I think he's the best high school player from the state of Wisconsin that I've ever seen play. And I was fortunate to see him play live a handful of times. Obviously, he had a great career at Wisconsin too. So I don't want to say that I was right by myself about him. I'd have to maybe take a little bit deeper dive, but I mean, that name kind of comes to mind because I saw him, so early in the process. But that film, like, you put on that sophomore junior tape of Hunter Wohler, it's special stuff. It's fun to watch. I guess it's not fun to watch if you're like a parent of the opposing team on the highlight film, but as long as you're not that person, it's a lot of fun to watch.
It was pretty obvious. Give me a guy, and through potentially no fault of his own, this isn't anything like that, but a guy that you really thought it would work out that for whatever reason it didn't. You were really in on this guy. Yeah.
So 2 guys from the same class, Jesse Hayes and James Adianju.
Oh, great names.
Those were big time gets for Wisconsin. I remember writing about them. I remember talking to them, I remember covering them, all that stuff. And for whatever reason, those guys just never clicked. Now, it would be interesting to see, because those guys were recruited to play in make sure I get this right, a 4-3 defense. Those guys could both be kind of your jumbo edge guys in this modern offense, or I'm sorry, modern defense that Wisconsin's running here. But at the time, those are huge gets for Wisconsin, and they just never kind of panned out. Both, stayed the entire career at Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. I think actually Adiandru, he transferred like his last year to some school. I'd have to go look back at it, but I don't want to, it's tough to call people busts, but I mean, those guys were, like I said, high priority guys that Brett Bielema and that staff put a lot of time into, and for whatever reason, just never really lived up to the hype of the recruiting buzz.
Yeah. And like, to me, when I say, like sometimes it's not even on the player, it's a scheme fit, or it's injuries, or it's bad luck. A lot of reasons go into why a player works or doesn't work. I'll tell you my guy, and it's almost embarrassing to say this, I was all in on Austin Kafensis. And
Jesus.
So I never saw him live, but like I just bought into the mobility, and gosh, this looks like a gamer. He looks like Tyler Donovan a little bit, but maybe a little more juice. And no, that didn't work.
Well, I'll give you a Kafensis story. And I was probably on the hype train too, because you looked at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
His dad was a very good PR guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of get caught up in the Gary Anderson. He's going to hit Utah. He's going to get all the best Utah guys. This is a, generational Utah guy. And then the first time I saw him live, he came up for a camp, and the camp took a little break. Kafensis was up there with his dad. And then he kind of gets out in the middle of Camp Randall and starts throwing. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, he is tiny. He that can't be. I go to the guy next to me. Is that him? Are you sure that's him? That's got to be him. I saw him talking to his dad, and that was my biggest takeaway. Not that he threw a bad ball or anything, but he was tiny, and he just didn't look the part. And then, I mean, he stayed true during that coaching switch and all that stuff. And I think that he threw a couple balls at the McLean Center, and Paul Chris said, "What do you think about safety or anywhere besides quarterback?"
Which he eventually shifted to safety. He eventually ended up at BYU, right? And he became a safety.
Yeah, he did.
Greg Lincecum, by the way, says, "John, you are truly a treasure. Thanks for all the hard work." Will Hannah says, "My guy was Lance Smith." There's an electric. He was kind of electric.
What about a Lance Smith comparison to Amari Latimer? Similar-ish body type.
Mm-hmm. Latimer more power, but yeah,
Latimer's probably a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, but yeah, Lance Smith, that's a blast from the past. I'm picturing his Rivals.com profile in my head right now. I can picture his high school photo.
You probably spent a lot of time doing it. I got to get you out of here, but I do want to give you one more question. I'm not going to get to all of them because I could talk to John for hours about this.
Well, let's go. I mean, as long as you need. That's keep firing.
Let's do it then. So here's a question for you. There's a priority recruitment. Any type of player, you could pick one Badgers coach in your 18 years of covering this team to win a recruiting battle. Who's the best recruiter Wisconsin has had in your time covering this team?
Oof. Henry Mason was really, really, really good. Right when I was getting started, and his ties in Ohio were well documented, and obviously he kind of had some health stuff pop up. But I guess from the teams and the staffs that I've covered, I'd say old Dave Dorne, not the longtime head coach at NC State. I mean, he was their ace type recruiter, and it was a different world back then because now you have these monster recruiting departments where those guys are putting in the legwork. I mean, those guys are building those relationships. But back in the day, it was like, yeah, this guy's going to coach linebackers, and he's also going to coordinate all our recruiting efforts. And I'm not sure exactly what Dave's title was, but he was kind of their ace guy where, he was he went down to recruit Craig Appleton, and then he went and got Monte Ball. And obviously I think, credit Brett Bielema, not to get on a tangent here, but one thing Brett did really, really well was identify coaching talent. You kind of look at his tree just specifically at Wisconsin. I think he's brought in some, John Settle was not a beast at recruiting. I think someone's trying to be funny, but no, he did an okay job. I think he got Jonathan Taylor, but just to go back to that, I would say Dave Dorne, young Dave Dorne. I think that he was known at that time for being just an excellent, excellent recruiter. And, outside the guys I just named, he went over, a lot of Wisconsin's top targets at that time. And obviously he moved up quick, became Wisconsin's defensive coordinator, then head coach. So there's been a handful of good ones that kind of stand out to you, but I'd have to go Dave Dorne, but that's a ways back.
That's an awesome answer. And I love these tangents because we're going through like all these eras of history that we both kind of lived through and we both covered, and players that like I could sit in a gas station and be stuck in a line and remember Lance Smith highlights, which is equal parts sad and amazing. Let me throw this comment up to you here because this is from Brian Shetty. This is from over the Discord. He says, first of all, love Jon. That's from Brian Shetty. Has he noticed a huge shift in the recruiting department with Max having left? How big a loss was that in the middle of a cycle?
Significant, but there's no good time for it. Although I do think Saeed left like the day before officials started. That probably wasn't great timing, but you could even argue the case though that they've already loaded up their official visitors and they're on campus and all that stuff has been kind of laid out. So I don't think there's ever a good time to lose a guy like Max. Not to sugarcoat it or anything. I mean that's a huge loss. There's a reason why Max was so well thought of, not just at Wisconsin, but it just in the world of college football. The USC wasn't the first school that tried to get Max away from Luke Fickell, and he's one of the best young guys that are doing it right now in the world of college football. So that's how things go, right? He was a piece of a large recruiting department, but it's like losing your 4-hitter and the guy who plays center field for you. I mean, you take that out of your lineup. That's tough to adjust to. And with him, he took those relationships with not only your 26s, but your top 27s, some of your 28s that you're laying groundwork with, and he takes it all to USC. So it wasn't crippling, and there's never a good time for that to happen. But that was a big blow. But that's was it Ethan Russo? He's getting up and running, getting his feet wet. He's on campus. And I know that just the few kind of things that I've heard about him from some people inside the program is that they're excited about him. I don't want to say cut from the same cloth, but he's a young guy who's has some recruiting chops already, who's I think kind of itching to get after it. Maybe Wisconsin's kind of recent efforts in Texas are a reflection of maybe a couple connections that he's got down there. So I'm interested to see what he's doing, but Max was a big blow. I mean, there's just no way around that. Wisconsin has, plenty of guys in that department to keep it afloat and keep it going, but that's a big blow. And, obviously USC's doing great things. I don't think it's all because of Max. They got like 30 commitments already, but a guy like Max, there's a reason why he demanded the attention, demanded, the bump in money and all that goes with it. So wish him the best over there. Max, a great dude. Excited to see what his career leads him in the next, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And listen, there's worse places you can go as a recruiting guy than USC.
Without a doubt.
He is the great Jon McNamara. Again, just thank you for everything you've done for the community, man. I can't say that enough. I know I let off with that, but I think it's a good way to end up. Jon, I know you're going to be around out there as always. Thank you as always. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today. Big recruiting weekend coming up. A bunch more content coming up on this show next week and this weekend as well as things start to happen on Wisconsin. And we will definitely talk to you later.